In the world of sumo, there are titans, there are legends, and then there are those characters so wild you can't help asking yourself, how on earth did this guy end up on the dohyo? Who could forget Ōrora Satoshi, the guy who turned the scale into a psychological weapon? Or Dewanojo Yoshihide, whose bouts often felt less like serious clashes and more like absurd comedy sketches. On SumoSpirit, we're bringing you the 10 most ridiculous sumo wrestlers in history. Grab your snacks, because this is going to be epic. Let's begin. Let's start with Ōrora Satoshi, the heaviest ever. Picture this. A man who didn't just walk, he loomed onto the dohyo. Ōrora wasn't just another rikishi, he was a titan. At his peak, he tipped the scales at 645 pounds, making him the heaviest professional sumo wrestler ever documented. Imagine the scene. A 1.9-meter giant stepping into the ring, facing opponents sometimes a fraction of his mass. The contrast was jarring, a mismatch on paper, but oddly hypnotic in reality. Some matches felt like David versus Goliath, except Goliath barely moved, and David had to muster everything just to budge him. Because in sumo, weight isn't everything. Despite his massive advantage, Ōrora struggled with speed and agility, the very qualities that often decide a bout. His mobility limitations meant that his gargantuan size was sometimes more a burden than an edge. He never climbed to the dizzying heights of the top divisions. His highest achieved rank was Makushita 43. Yet that didn't make him forgettable, far from it. He became unforgettable. Not for championships or glory, but for being the living anomaly. The walking mountain who redefined what big meant in sumo. Let's continue with Yamamotoyama Ruda. Meet Yama, not just sumo wrestlers, a mountain walking on two legs. By the time he stepped onto the dohyo at his heaviest, he weighed in around 265 kilograms, about 584 pounds, making him the heaviest Japanese-born professional rikishi ever recorded. Yama managed to climb the ranks fast. By January 2009, he had reached the top division, the Makuuchi. His highest official rank was Maegashira 9. But as often happens when you bet it all on size, other forces, injuries, instability, and ultimately scandal conspired to halt his ascent. In April 2011, following a sweeping match-fixing investigation by the Japan Sumo Association, Yama was among the wrestlers asked to retire. Yet Yama didn't fade into oblivion. He turned what could have been a tragic end into something else entirely, a new beginning. He leapt from the dohyo into the world of entertainment. Television, commercials, even films. One of his more surreal credits? A cameo in John Wick, Chapter 2. Now meet Shonan Zakura. Not a giant, not a legend, not a champion, but perhaps the most unforgettable anti-hero the sumo world has seen. His tale isn't one of triumph. It's a bizarre saga of persistence in defeat. Shonan Zakura stepped into the professional ring in September 2015. His real name was Shota Hattori. But what made him memorable wasn't his entrance, but what happened after. A career record that ended at 3 wins and 238 losses. At one point, he suffered 104 straight defeats, a streak so long and brutal that it became history. Picture it. Each tournament, each match, another defeat, over and over. While other wrestlers fought for glory, rank, promotion, Shonan Zakura seemed to fight against gravity, against odds, against defeat itself. He never rose above the lowest division, his highest rank, Jonokuchi 9. But here's where things get strangely poetic. In a sport obsessed with kachikoshi, winning records, with glory and upward mobility, Shonan Zakura turned losing into a grim kind of legacy. Every loss, every fall, they added up to something almost mythical. He became a cult figure, a master of failure, a human cautionary tale, or maybe a symbol of stubbornness. Some saw humiliation. Others might argue there was a strange dignity in it, in showing up again and again despite it all. Because in an arena where size, strength, momentum matter, Shonan Zakura proves a harsh lesson. Sumo isn't only about power or weight, but heart, nerve, and sometimes sheer stubbornness. He never became a hero of the dohyo. He never gained fans for spectacular throws or championship titles. But he became something else, a legend not of glory, but of resilience. A bizarre footnote in sumo history that forces you to ask, what does it really mean to lose? At the end, When he retired with more than 230 bouts lost, there was no trophy, no fanfare. But maybe the real legacy of Shonan Zakura isn't in the wins he didn't get, but in the fact that he kept stepping into the ring anyway. This is Mainoumi, not a mountain, not a powerhouse, but a human chess player on the dohyo. At only 1.71 meters and around 98 kilograms, he looked tiny compared to the giants of sumo. But Mainoumi didn't come to wrestle by size. He came to win with ingenuity, speed, and technique. His nickname, Waza no Depato, the department store of moves, didn't come out of thin air. Over his career, he used around 33 different kimarite, a full catalog of ways to topple a foe. He once used a brutal combo, leg trip, grab, head push, to flatten an opponent twice his size, pure tactical alchemy. He smashed expectations. He cracked into the top division just a year after debut, grabbed multiple technique prizes, and at one point reached the rank of Komusubi. When Mainoumi left the ring in 1999, his record wasn't legendary, but his legacy wasn't in raw power or bulk. It was in proving that in sumo, brains, skill, and guts can win even when you're outmatched in size. Let's continue with Takanoyama Shuntaro, the Czech skeleton. Imagine this, a lean, long-limbed judoka from Prague stepping into the ring full of tanks. That's Takanoyama. Not a massive sumo monster, he stood about 1.85 meters and weighed around 98 kilograms, a fraction of what many of his adversaries carried, but what he lacked in bulk, he more than made up with heart, timing, and cunning. Takanoyama brought a different style to the dohyo. Far from traditional shove and push, he danced, slipped, grappled, threw. When giants lumbered in, he moved like a ghost, turning the fight into fluid motion. Against all odds, he soared. In 2011, he made history. From lightweight underdog to Makuuchi, the top division, he climbed to Megashira 12, a major achievement for someone who never relied on weight. Matches featuring him often played out like David versus Goliath, a wiry Czech underdog using judo-inspired throws, hip swings, and footwork to topple hulking opponents twice his size. Takanoyama wasn't a champion in the traditional sense. He didn't bulldoze through with brute force, but he proved something far wilder. That in sumo, a world built on mass and momentum, skill, speed, and fearless creativity can rewrite the rules. He left the dohyo in 2014, but left behind a legacy, the living proof that even skinny kids can make sumo legends. Now, Takamisakari Seike, the brilliant clown of sumo, Takamisakari Seiken, a sumo wrestler who never looked or behaved like a statue of muscle and seriousness. He joined the pros in 1999, and by 2002 he had climbed to the top division. He eventually reached the rank of Komusubi, a feat not many manage. Despite not being the heaviest or the strongest, he carved his own legend. Before every match, he turned preparation into performance. He slapped his chest, flexed, twisted, and walked as if malfunctioning machinery came to life, tossed salt everywhere, rolled his eyes wide behind his nearsighted gaze. Every entrance felt like theater. Once, a rival even dubbed him RoboCop, because his moves looked mechanical, exaggerated, and unforgettable. But it wasn't all show. He backed up the spectacle with real sumo. He earned several special prizes, twice scored Kinboshi by defeating Yokozuna, giants, and collected enough wins and respect to stay relevant in the insanely demanding world of top division sumo. What made him so special wasn't raw power or monstrous size, but heart, personality, and the willingness to make sumo fun, human, unpredictable. When others bulldozed through with weight and force, Takamisakari brought energy, emotion, and style. Meet Kitazakura, a wrestler who began his journey in March 1987. Humble and patient. Decades passed, full of struggles and lower division grind, until finally, in July 2001, he broke into the top division with the rank of Megashira 9. A dream for many, but for Kitazakura, just the beginning of his true path, performance. Once in the spotlight, Kitazakura didn't wrestle like everyone else. He embraced the ritual between bouts, the looming tension, the silence, and turned it into spectacle. He adopted the grand salt-throwing routine popularized by an older generation, but dialed it up. Huge handfuls catapulted high, theatrical poses, eyes intense, as if to say, "I'm here. I may not be the strongest, but you won't forget me." even though he never became a dominant force, spending more time in the second-tier Yuryo than in Makuuchi, and never claiming a top division championship, his presence was magnetic. He fought with determination, often pleading with opponents to begin the bout, hungry, eager, defiant. Kitazakura turned sumo's sacred rituals into performance art. Salt throwing wasn't just purification, it became his calling card. A wrestler with modest results, yes, but with the heart of a showman and a flair that made him unforgettable. Now, meet Dewanojo, a walking wall of flesh and mass. At his heaviest, Dewanojo tipped the scales at about 569 pounds and 1.9 meters tall, making him one of the heaviest sumo wrestlers in the history of the sport. And yet, despite that immense size, Dewanojo never cracked the elite. His entire career played out in the lower tiers, mostly in Sandanme and Makushita, far from the glamour, money, and prestige of the top two divisions. That contrast, colossal mass versus modest status, is exactly what makes his story so absurdly entertaining. Every time he entered the ring, you almost expected the ground to shake. Opponents who were lighter, faster, more nimble would approach carefully, some trying quick throws, others maneuvering around him, hoping to exploit what size alone couldn't guarantee. Stability, technique, agility. The result? Matches that looked more like bizarre theater. You'd see a monstrous body looming over a smaller, more agile opponent, but sometimes the nimble just outmoved the behemoth. Dewanojo's presence created that delicious tension. A giant on one side, a nimble underdog on the other, and the fight didn't always go in favor of the mammoth. So yes, Dewanojo was a wall, but a wall that never quite became a fortress. Imagine a wrestler who arrives from the Pacific with not just power, but personality. Jesse Takamiyama, Kuhaulua, stepped onto the dohyo in Tokyo, carrying an aura from another world, tall, broad, with sideburns, and a presence that filled half the ring. Born in Maui, he first entered pro sumo in 1964, and over time carved a place in history. In July 1972, at the Nagoya Basho, Takamiyama made history. He became the first non-Japanese wrestler ever to win a top division championship. With a 13-2 record, he lifted the Emperor's Cup, a groundbreaking moment that echoed far beyond the dohyo. He was promoted to rank Seikiwaka shortly after, proof that outsiders could not only compete, but conquer. But Takamiyama's impact went well beyond that championship. Over a two-decade career, he fought in 97 consecutive top division tournaments, a record of consistency and endurance in sumo's toughest ring. His signature, raw strength, and unshakable determination. He wasn't the flashiest technician. Most of his wins came from force-outs and push-outs, yet his presence, persistence, and larger-than-life aura turned him into a beloved figure among fans. When he retired in 1984, he didn't disappear. He changed nationality to Japanese, took the name Daigoro Watanabe, and created his own stable, Azumazeki Stable. That made him the first foreign-born wrestler ever to become a stable master, laying the path for future non-Japanese rikishi. Takamiyama wasn't just the Hawaiian with the afro. He was the barrier breaker. He showed the sumo world that tradition could stretch, that outsiders could belong, and win. The last of the list? Biamba. A Mongolian who didn't just step onto the dohyo, he turned it into a global stage. In Japan, he competed professionally, reaching as high as Makushita 15, but his true legacy came after he walked away from the traditional sumo world. On the amateur and international circuit, he exploded. Biamba became a two-time world sumo champion, lifted gold at the World Games, and dominated the US Sumo Open with a staggering record of 110 wins to 7 losses. But weight and wins don't tell the full story. Biamba was more than a competitor. He was a performer, an ambassador. Wherever he went, from Tokyo to L.A., from sumo mats to movie sets, he carried sumo with him. He appeared in films, commercials, TV shows, music videos, and traveled to dozens of countries to give sumo exhibitions and demonstrations. His exhibitions became legendary. He would lift, flip, and throw opponents often far heavier than him, doing it with a showman's charisma and the athletic foundation of a world-class wrestler. Fans weren't just watching sumo, they were watching something larger: strength, spectacle, and a living bridge between cultures. At the end of the day, These ridiculous rikishi aren't just odd footnotes in sumo history. They're the ones who keep sumo's most absurd, unforgettable stories alive. In a sport built on ceremony, tradition, and seriousness, they injected exactly what was missing: surprise, humor, and the kind of moments you never forget. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment down below telling us who shocked you the most, and subscribe to SumoSpirit for more wild, amazing sumo content. See you in the next video.